All right, everyone. I'd like to welcome you to episode 2 of the Chronicles. The search continues. Today, I am joined by my dear friend, Mr. Ben Krause. Ben, how we doing this evening, man?
I'm doing very well, thank you.
Yeah, man. Cool. Good to know. Thank you so much for coming, or coming in a relative sense, man. Thank you so much for popping on into this chat room.
Sure.
Um, Ben is a dear friend of mine that goes way back to high school. I'm happy to say that we've stuck together for the long haul, and our high school days are well behind us, but our friendship has persevered and continues to move forward, man. So Ben has always been, in my opinion, one of the most measured and, in many respects, one of the wisest people I've ever had the luxury to be around. I've certainly taken a lot from him, and I wanted to certainly snatch up this opportunity to speak to him for a little while. Ben, where I wanted to start, a lot of where we connected over the years has been musical. I've seen kind of indirectly you grow, at least in my eyes, which is, a very distant observer's kind of perspective, to be clear. But basically, when I got to know you, you were playing bass in sleight of hand. And those are some treasured memories for you, and even for me, to be honest. Those are very good memories for me as well, watching you all perform. And then over the years, I just kind of saw what I'll call an evolution, but I don't know if you think that's a fair estimate, where suddenly you were picking up a guitar, you were picking up a banjo, you were picking up a mandolin. And at least from my perspective, I've never known somebody in my life with what I'll call such a pushed ear. I think there are kind of a lot of different genres and artists that you've kind of crossed over the course of your life in terms of what you're influenced by and what you appreciate. Can you kind of talk me through, I don't want to say your introduction to music, but certainly how everything from Dave Matthews Band to Fish to Kamasi Washington and kind of everything in between has kind of become part of your musical lexicon and kind of how you've made it your own?
Sure. Well, first, you're like making me blush, so I'm flattered.
There you go.
But yeah, I mean, listen, I've always, for the longest time, I've played one instrument or another. I started at a pretty young age, around, I guess, like maybe 6 or 7 years old, starting to play piano. Wasn't really voluntary. My parents essentially got a hold of this really old piano that was never in tune, and I think they just wanted to make sure that they were getting use out of it. So my sister and I were signed up for piano lessons at an early age, and I did that for a number of years. And I guess when I moved into elementary school, or whatever year they start introducing instruments in grade school, I guess around like maybe 9 years old, I started to play the trumpet in school band, and I did that for years. Actually, I did it through like mid high school. Wasn't particularly good at it, but I stuck with it. Mainly playing classical music. And then at some point, I guess it was between 8th and 9th grade, around 13, 14 years old, I started to get into, more essentially rock and roll, alternative rock. My cousin was a close friend of mine too. He started playing the electric guitar. He got really into like the grunge scene in Nirvana, and he needed a bass player, of course. So I didn't have much going on. So my dad was really cool, and we went to Sam Ash, and he got me my first bass guitar. So it was a Fender Mexican jazz bass. And yeah, I mean, listen, from there, stuck with it. Played in a few different bands in high school, primarily like rock bands and alt rock bands, funk rock type bands. And, during that period, I started, we like cut our teeth, my cousin and I, like playing like every Nirvana song that we could. And I feel like I got bored of that pretty quick. And I also like, as a bass player, I've always had my dad introduce me to music as well, and he was kind of super into like jazz fusion, some jam bands as well. So I always had him like in my ear saying like, there's this whole other world out there outside of Nirvana. There's like this whole other world outside of like, straight eighth note bass lines. And if you want, I will show it to you. So, at the time I'm like, sure, why not? I had also started listening to Red Hot Chili Peppers, and Flea was a major influence for me in high school. So that sort of started to open my mind up to, what I'll call like, funky bass playing, more, virtuosic type of bass playing that I had never really been exposed to. So once that door started to open up, I got super into it. Yeah. And that started like expanding my mind musically. And it was a combination of like my influence from my dad, combination of that, a combination of me just being like an, angsty teenager who wanted to push the limits on my instrument and not just be like in the shadow of the guitar player. And then another part of it like is technology. So when I was in high school, like Napster, middle school, high school, Napster and peer-to-peer file sharing was becoming a thing. So like that in itself, like exposed me to so many things musically, genres that I wouldn't have been exposed to otherwise. And I'm ashamed to say that I wasn't paying for that music at the time. But it just opened up so many doors. And then that bled into college and started meeting folks who were into all sorts of music that I never even heard of or encountered. So that just kind of took me in all sorts of directions.
That's great, man. Yeah. And for you to not only take that journey as a listener, but also as a musician, it's something I respect the heck out of, I mean, I consider myself, a modest vocalist and even more modest kind of ukulele player. And I take a lot of pride in kind of the sounds that I take pride for myself, taking a bright instrument, what I would consider a bright instrument in the ukulele, and making it into something a bit darker, something with a little more edge, here's your Deftones, here's your Alice in Chains, things like that. Yeah. But certainly for you to not only change the sounds of the instruments you play, but also to kind of change the instruments you pick up based on the sounds you want to create. I mean, I can't tell you how much, how much that blows me away, man. I don't think a lot of people can do that. I hope you realize how special that is.
Yeah, I mean, listen, I'm not trying to be modest, but I feel like string instruments, when you have the same sort of, for the most part, playing technique, like if you're plucking or strumming, I found over the years that it's easy to pick it up if you have like a sense of rhythm, right? And a sense of like, if you're playing a fretted string instrument, if you already know how to do that, you already have the finger strength to do that. You know how to work your way up and down a neck. That helps. And I feel like you're able to translate it pretty easily, whether it's a bass or whether it's a guitar or a banjo or a mandolin or ukulele. I find that once you like get a good enough handle on that, you could translate it pretty easily. Even though it might be kind of daunting. I find that so, I mean, it's easier said than done, but
Sure.
I feel like I'm like faking it half the time.
No doubt. Well, one of the places I saw you fake it quite a bit back in the day was the Velvet Lounge when we were kind of hitting up that open mic very consistently. First of all, before I even ask you a question, I want to throw a quick rest in peace shout out to Bill Withers, because I know we used to play, in a way, we used to play his song when we were singing songs in the style of Big Willie, when we were singing Just the Two of Us for Will Smith back in those days. That, for my part, was a really great time in life because it was kind of something consistently that we would meet up as friends to go out and do, and it was kind of anchored in music, but it was also just anchored in, you know, sharing good times, and it, you know, it was a real kind of community vibe. I kind of wanted to ask, and it was also, in a sense, for me, it was also eye-opening because suddenly that's the first time I saw you picking up other instruments, and not to say in any sense of the word that like you were my focus when we were going there, but it was one of those things where it was just like, oh, he plays that too, huh? And then like I would look away and you'd pick up something else and I'd be like, oh yeah, oh wow, okay, he's doing that now. So it was pretty cool for me to kind of see that. I wanted, because I know I have my own set of kind of memories and things that I treasure about being at the Velvet Lounge. Can you kind of talk me through how you felt about those days and maybe any particular stories that pop out as things you really treasured, especially all these years later?
Yeah, those are amongst my fondest memories. You know, like post college life. I So in terms of like how Velvet Lounge came to be, I so after doing undergrad, I moved out to Long Island to my parents' house for a few years, and um, very quickly, you know, I was working a full time day job at the time, and I was still playing music at home, but I sort of started to get the itch. I wanted to start playing with people. I wanted to start find opportunities to play out. And you know, Long Island, suburban Suffolk County, at least like when where I was looking, there just were a ton of opportunities to play out.
Yeah.
And I didn't really have a lot of folks that I was playing with at that time. So I actually like went and found up like meeting someone through Craigslist,
Yeah.
who
Whoa.
he was this folk guitar player, and we jammed a bunch of times. And he's like, "Oh yeah, there's this open mic that I do every Wednesday at the Velvet Lounge," and he's like, "We should go do a set." I think we played there together once or twice, and then whatever reason it didn't work out between the two of us. Nice guy, but it just didn't work out. We weren't dealing, you know, we weren't trying to do the same thing musically. And I just didn't stop going. At first I was like there by myself playing, and I almost became a regular there. And then I started inviting my friends, and started inviting other musicians to come play with me on stage. And it really wound up becoming, it was almost like a hang, you know, like a really
Yeah.
fun hang. It was on a Wednesday night, good way to break up the week. You know, we got in pretty tight with the sound guy who ran the open mic. So like, you know, he would let us like give us an extra 5 minutes to play up there and sort of let us do our thing and be completely silly. And I'm sure some nights you're pretty terrible. Um,
Yeah, man.
but it
I
was
can
fun.
attest to.
And
Those were the nights I jumped up. Yeah.
no, please. No, listen, it was like, for me, like I just started messing around the banjo. So like, it was like an opportunity for me to like workshop some stuff on stage, and see what kind of a reaction I can get. I was like super into, I was listening to a lot of Dylan then, super into like playing traditional folk songs. And so like, you know, I definitely had this, I'll call it like a shtick, you know.
Yeah.
And it was fun. And, you know, I started eventually, what were like solo performances evolved into playing with my buddy Jason Kaplan, and then Tom as well as a couple other folks. And we had this little like ad hoc group called the Hebrews.
The Hebrews.
Yeah, you know, we played a couple Jewish Hebrew folk songs.
You bet. I learned on the fly. Although over the years, I got pretty good. I could
No,
lead a theater if I wanted to.
but yeah, listen, it was more like fun. And it was always just like a joy to play with friends. It was like during those times that I would really start to form a relationship with the person that became my wife, Deanna. So that was another part of it. I have so many memories. Yeah, it was just a lot of fun, a lot of silliness. Like I feel like I would play the banjo, I play the guitar, I would bust out a kazoo here and there, whatever. And like it was sort of an open invitation. Whoever wanted to come up can jam with us. So
Yeah,
it was really just more fun than anything, and a lot of great memories came out of it.
that's great, man. I remember great. It was amazing. One, but you could say this about any open mic. It was wild the amount of talent that kind of scrolled through there at a given time. Not even limited to our friends. I remember so vividly, a gentleman with a theremin came in
Yeah,
and just absolutely lit the place up. And that's what was cool. I've been to a few open mics, and I've really only been to a couple where it felt like people were actually engaged in what was going on and not just waiting for for what would be their turn. And I think maybe it had something to do with the time of our lives. I was still in college. You were maybe fresh out. I do remember very distinctly coming home from college, and Jason Kaplan said, like, this is what we do on Wednesdays now. And I'm just like, oh, okay. Like, you can give me a ride? He's just like, yeah, I got it. And I'm like, okay. Then, yeah, of course, that's what we do. But I just remember a lot of connections. I feel like if I called them friendships, you'd be like, why don't you talk to them now? But the truth is, it's just because we were there in the moment. You know what I'm saying? And I remember Edwina on the drums doing the gosh darn I said, doing the
yeah,
call and response. I remember the evening news stepping up. It's amazing how those are kind of what speaks to you and sticks with you. Oh, you know what else I remember? Here's the thing I remember. Do you remember when the gentleman was like leaning up against the wall and he thought it was the wall and it was the door?
yeah.
He wound up, he wound up like completely like smacking out. I've never heard in my life the air get sucked out of a room so quickly as when that guy just went from vertical to gosh darn horizontal, man.
Yeah,
I'll
it was
never
a
forget
pretty hard fall. No, but it's interesting. Yeah, I definitely like had a. It was like the first time you talk about like making these friends in the moment. It was the first time, like probably the first and only time where I'd been like a regular somewhere where not only like did I know the sound guy and maybe people who were attending bar, but um, I had like friends that I would only see on Wednesday,
that.
for like 2 or 3 hours at a time. And like that was the extent of the relationship. And uh, didn't like make it any like less of a relationship, but it was like a point in time, and it was just a lot of fun and definitely a lot of talent coming through there. So really appreciated that aspect as well.
Yeah. And I'll never forget one time I went to an Islanders game with my sister, and we decided we didn't want to eat afterwards. It was too late. That's not the interesting part. But she said, like, I still want to do something. And I said, like, we could swing by the Velvet Lounge. And she's like, who's there? And I'm like, oh, I don't know, but we'll know somebody. And so we wound up, just me and my sister going to the Velvet Lounge. And, it's not necessarily this Ali and Zaire moment, but it is one of these things where I just walk in. And I do think that you and Deanna were there, but it's amazing how Noel walks in and suddenly you hear like, "Hey, Polly," and I'm just like, "What's up, dude? What's up, Dad?" And she's just like, "How often do you come here?" And I'm just like, "Just every Wednesday." It was a really special moment. I don't know if Noel remembers it the way I do, but yeah, man, it was pretty very interesting for sure. Um, so I know your music pursuits and also just your life. We're focusing on music, which I know is very kind of only one aspect of you, only one aspect of all of us. But I know that your music took you out to Astoria. And here's the part where we jump into the storytelling, because I got to put you on the spot. Because you put me in a very, it wasn't awkward, but you put me in a situation I didn't want to be in. unintentionally one time.
Okay.
So one time, back when I was doing my international education job, where I had to be very formal all the time, you reach out to me and you say, as only you can, you say, hey, I'm curating, this is a text, but this is my impression of you. Hey, I'm curating a show in Queens tonight. I think you should come. And that's all you said. And I say to my coworkers, I'm like, yeah, okay, I can make it. And so I say to my coworkers, I'm like, hey, my buddy, he used the word curated when he invited me to this show. Do you think I have to dress up? And so I'm literally asking the room, and we have like a little straw poll going, and it's like 7-2 that I should dress up. And so I'm already wearing like a collared shirt. I swing home and I get like dress pants, and I put and I put like a little like jacket on, and then I show up to the Queen's Kick Shawl later, and I'm like way overdressed for this show. And then you, on your break, you come up, and to your credit, you're like, hey man, you look nice. And I'm just like, yeah man, well you said curated. Nobody says that, man.
Yeah, you have to remember that like my day job is being a marketer. So like, I got to use whatever's gonna make legitimize like whatever I'm doing, but draw people in, right? So yeah, I maybe wrong word to use.
You would have had me at playing, man. Oh boy, yeah. But a story is certainly a scene for a lot of great memories. I mean, to be honest, we can spread that over a lot of Josh Jordan appearances in terms of telling those stories. One thing I did want to mention, though, I was out with Kozak a couple summers ago at this point, but it feels like yesterday. It really is one of those moments. And Kozak lives over by you in the Astoria Ditmars area, actually like super close, to be honest. And I do remember one time I'm there with Kozak, we're hanging out, and Kozak's starting to tell me about, he's like, hey man, you got to check out this place. This place is wild. And I'm just like, okay, what place? Because I don't really care about the place. Like I'm more comfortable sitting on a couch. But he says, this place called Les Amis. and immediately I just start laughing like this. To be honest, you can tell it still kind of resonates. And I say to him like, oh no, I'm familiar with Les Amis. And from my perspective, I just want you to tell one story from it. You don't have to talk about the venue too much. But from my perspective, it was just this Greek bar where you could pop in and people were still smoking when you couldn't smoke. Like that in and of itself was the red flag that I needed. And what resonates to me about it is I never heard the music stop. And that may sound like a weird thing to say, and maybe it's not as unique as I thought, but like I genuinely feel like they would have like one girl finish a song, the music would keep going, and then like the singer would change, and they would keep the live music going. And I've never kind of seen like live this notion of just like the music doesn't stop. Like typically there is always this lull of just like, all right, and now we clap and we appreciate and then we start again. And I remember being there on a particular night. And to be clear, I think I've only been there like 3 times in my life. And I think now it's closed. But I do remember thinking like, holy crow, like, do they ever slow down? And they never did. So the reason I bring it up, if you have thoughts on the venue, great. I would love to hear them. But what I did want to hear is a story about the time when Sean Taylor bought a drink for the owner. If you could talk me through that story, because I wasn't there for that, I would really appreciate kind of hearing that again.
I'll try. It was like after a night of drinking. So like, yeah, this place is, as you were like hinting at, it's like exempt from laws. So, I forget, I don't know what we were doing that night, but we stumbled into this place like late, like after hours, like 3 a.m. after hours.
Right.
and we there was a live band at the time. They were playing like,
Because they don't stop. Let's
yeah,
be
they
clear.
never stopped. And it was 3 a.m. They were still going. And it was like sort of like, I don't know if it was like Greek, Turkish type music. Like they had like someone was playing like a bouzouki or something, some strange instruments you don't see every day. It was actually really cool, the music. People were smoking inside, like you said. There was a woman who like every 10 minutes would come with like a basket full of $1 bills and just toss them in the air.
Really?
It was
Whoa, I've never seen that.
there were just dollar bills all over the floor, and nobody was taking off their clothes. And yeah, it was wild because like it was like getting late in bars. You usually expect to get last call around that time. Usually you expect the staff to start pushing you out,
Right.
but they weren't, and the band was kept going. It's mostly men at that point, except for the female, cocktail waitresses and bartenders and whatnot. So, for some reason, my buddy Sean Taylor, who I was with, got it in his head that in order for us to be accepted in this place where we were clearly out of place because like the average age was probably 42 and everyone or most of everyone was like Mediterranean Greek ethnicity, and Sean felt that he needed to really prove himself to someone that he thought was the owner of the place because this guy seemed really important. He had like a chain on, had like a little entourage and like a little table tucked in the corner. So he had to have been the owner.
Of course,
And
naturally.
he's like, well, we have to go buy him a drink. I'm like, what? So I wasn't really involved with this. I let him go and prove himself.
Yeah, man, at 3 in the morning.
So he went and bought this guy a drink. The guy accepted it because it was a free drink.
Yeah.
And it was like, it's a little weird. Like if the guy owns the place, do we need to be buying him a drink? I don't know. It's a nice gesture. Who knows if he was the owner? He just seemed important. And then, long story short, we wound up staying there till like 6 in the morning. They never closed.
Wow.
So like I said, the laws don't apply to Lammy's. And unfortunately it's closed. Now it's a motorcycle club and I can't get anywhere near there. So
no doubt, man. You should buy the owner a drink. You can get a little closer.
Yeah. Or like wear leather pants or something.
No doubt. I don't know if I have a pair. I could work on that. Man, oh man. That's unreal. I'd like to imagine that music never stopped until like the police came and said like, all right, like seriously, you're done. At least
they have local law enforcement in their pocket or something. I don't know.
Yeah, no doubt. Man, I appreciate that. I do love that story. And that place in a weird way, especially because we walk by it every time, at least I walk by it every time I visit there. For a place I've only been to like 2-3 times, it's really etched in my heart. But anyway, last thing I wanted to touch on is something that I owe you an apology for. And that is for unintentionally, over the course of several trips to Europe, waking you up at ungodly hours of the morning. And that all started over the course of 4 years when I was doing my international education job. I used to organize these massive trips for about 400, 500 people to go abroad to Europe. And it'd be split into 2 groups. But, excuse me, depending on the trip and who was helping me out. And certainly for my first one to Rome, I was very much Robin and not Batman. But depending on the trip, I would be there for like 6 to like 12 days. And my first one to Rome, I remember being in the Piazza Nirvana, which was lovely, actually. It really was my favorite place to be. And it wasn't necessarily a tourist spot. And I remember texting Ben. It might not have being anything important, but like the whole time difference just didn't even register to me. And then, so I text him, and then I get a text maybe about 30 minutes later from Ben saying like, "Oh, cool," and then just kind of mentioning the time, and I'm just like, "Oh, my bad." And then lo and behold, the year goes by, and I'm in London, and I see Big Ben, and I'm not immune to just being an idiot. And who the hell else am I going to text, with my first picture of Big Ben, other than Ben Krause? And once again, this time it dawns on me, but it winds up being the equivalent of like maybe 6 in the morning for Long Island, and I'm just there enjoying my afternoon in London. And after doing it by accident twice, I just had to make it a thing. And so for both my trips to Dublin and Prague, I made it a point to pick the finest Saturday morning and send Ben a text with a really obnoxious pun and just kind of wish him well. And I guess I just wanted to kind of acknowledge that publicly. And certainly, I owe you an apology for all that.
I mean, to be clear, like they weren't like ungodly like hours. Like they were like mostly like 7 or 8 in the morning on a Saturday, which is probably when I should have been waking up anyway. So, but I always appreciated it, and it more than anything, the especially like the subsequent years after the first two, always made me smile.
Hey, good, man. Right on. Boy, oh boy. You know what's probably not as fun? That time I was trying to use your laptop to book hotel reservations. Boy, oh boy. When we were going to the fish show that morning.
Yeah. I remember.
Yeah. Good Lord. All right. That's probably not the best story. That was a rough morning. That was
it was before like Hotel Tonight type apps, so.
Yeah, baby boy. And Ben's computer needed like a finger swipe, which I eventually wrote a play about, which shows you how weird I am. But yeah.
Wherever you could draw inspiration, right? So.
Exactly, man. And that's what these kind of sessions are all about. Just to kind of acknowledge those stories and acknowledge what brings us together. And Ben, I want to thank you for your time. You have any last second thoughts, any questions, anything like that?
No, I mean, listen, thanks for thinking of me to do this. I was like a little afraid going into this. I'm not going to lie. And I also was like, you know what? He's going to ask me about like a bunch of stories that I was probably like pretty inebriated and wouldn't remember. So like, I feel like you threw me a bunch of softballs, so I appreciate that.
Well, the idea is for you to come out again,
Yeah, I guess that's true. So, but yeah, listen, thanks for having me. I always enjoy talking to you and laughing with you and talking about music or whatever, or lay on me. So really, thanks for having me.
All right, man. Thank you so much, Mr. Ben Krause. This was episode 2 of the Chronicles. The search continues. Thank you all very much. Bye-bye.